Take it away.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Alan Kissick. I'm the Executive Director of the Northern California Territory of the American Diabetes Association. Really excited to have all of you all today join in for What Should I Eat? It's my honor and my privilege to introduce two endocrinologists to you from Steady Health. We have Dr. Calvin Wu and Dr. Reddy. I'll allow them to introduce themselves here shortly. But first and foremost, thank you again for joining, and over to you.
Dr. Calvin Wu, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Dr. Calvin Wu. I'm an endocrinologist based in San Francisco with a background in bioengineering and in internal medicine and pediatrics. So I've cared for the full age spectrum from newborns to the elderly. And I've always had a passion for the intersection of technology with healthcare. So I'm really proud to be part of an effort at Steady Health to revolutionize the patient-provider experience and deliver diabetes care in a more thoughtful and meaningful way.
Yeah, and I'm Sushma Reddy. I'm a clinical endocrinologist, actually in Michigan. Practiced here for about 30 years, and I just love what CGM can do for my patients. And I saw what Steady was doing and really leveraging the full potential of CGM, taking it to the next level and allowing patients to visualize what their meals do, what their exercise do, and how really everyday life affects their glucose levels, and really empowering the patients so that they can take control of their diabetes and live the life they choose. And so I joined Steady Health in June, and I'm really excited because we're now expanding to Washington State, and we'll be able to help even more people with diabetes and prediabetes, not only in California, but in the state of Washington as well.
Excellent.
Great. Yeah, so for those of you unfamiliar with Steady, let me just give you a brief introduction. We're a completely virtual diabetes clinic. As Dr. Reddy mentioned, we are serving members all over California and Washington. And I think the first thing to think about is we are first and foremost a full service endocrinology clinic. So we do visits, write prescriptions, take care of lab orders and paperwork, but we also uniquely leverage the power of continuous glucose monitoring and the convenience of telemedicine and messaging to create a more connected, more personal, more data-driven diabetes care experience. So if you or anyone you know has ever wanted more support around diabetes management, I invite you to check out our website. I'm shown below at Steady Health, and to learn more about what we do and help spread the word. I mean, the pandemic is no reason not to get your diabetes care and so forth. And so we really want to provide all of that. And we can provide all of that, I should say, via people's smartphones at home or wherever they might be. So I think it's easy to talk about eating healthy, but for me personally, I didn't realize how truly important diet and nutrition can be until I started seeing the difference with continuous glucose monitoring. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with this technology, CGM is a small wearable that you put on for 1 to 2 weeks at a time, and it continuously checks your blood sugar readings throughout the day, whether you're sleeping or working out. The traditional experience is, poking your finger, getting a blood glucose reading. All you're really going to see typically is going to be about 1 to 4 data points a day. That certainly gives you a glimpse of what your blood sugars look like, but it's nowhere near enough to help you understand the full impact of your daily lifestyle choices. By contrast, when you get readings every 5 to 15 minutes with CGM, you're looking at nearly 100 to 300 readings a day. And with that, you're getting not just a snapshot, but more like a video of how your blood sugars respond to your meals. So now you can really tease apart which meals raise your blood sugar a lot and which don't. So next slide. With all this information, our approach to Steady is to really put the tools and expertise around how to interpret that data in your hands and ultimately empower people with diabetes to be able to live the life around diabetes they want. Our engineers actually built the software so that our members can see CGM data right underneath every meal they track, so that now you can go back and analyze what happened and learn from it. Not only do we train people on how to make the most of their CGM experience, we also conduct two-hour-long visits within the first month really to really connect with our members and understand their story and how they're managing their diabetes. As you can see here, we're also available to discuss issues whenever they should rise over messaging. And even more exciting, by having access to that data remotely, we can help keep people informed about how they're doing relative to their own health goals and be proactive when they might need help. We believe that this is the kind of care model that should be available to everyone with diabetes today. Not the typical visit every couple of months and A1C check just to see how you're doing. And in this process, I should say, we've learned a ton about nutrition. So next slide. So let's talk about the topic that brought us here today, which is what can I eat? I think one popular and helpful framework to start with is just understanding the diabetes plate method, which is illustrated here. You can see on the left here that the plate is, half of that plate is made up of non-starchy vegetables. And just to clarify, this is typically a 9-inch plate is the size that we're talking about here. But half of that plate is made up of non-starchy vegetables. Then a quarter of that will be carbohydrates, and a quarter of that will be proteins. And often the recommendation is to have water or a 0-calorie drink. And just for illustration purposes, this is an example of such a plate, right? You can see here half that plate is filled with chopped salad, sauteed Brussels sprouts. The grains make up your carbs, and the pan-grilled shrimp, for instance, makes up the protein. So I think this is a nice, simple, tool to use as we get started. But as we'll talk about later and so forth, there is no one way to kind of eat with diabetes. So I think as we get started here, let me really just touch on some general principles of a healthy diet. I think we can summarize it to these three first, and then we can talk a little bit more about other specifics. But one is to emphasize non-starchy vegetables. In general, vegetables have a wealth of nutrition and nutritional value, and particularly with non-starchy vegetables, the impact on blood sugar is not as high. Meanwhile, it's to choose whole foods, over highly processed foods to the extent whatever possible. Really, when you choose things that you can really see, you see what went into your food, it really tends to bode well for blood sugar control. And last but not least, it's being very mindful about the type of fats, sugars, and sodium you put into your body. Saturated fats in particular have been shown to raise your risk for heart disease, as have trans fats. And then added sugars, for instance, often in the form of sugar-sweetened beverages and otherwise are definitely, adding to the mix. And empty calories, we'll say. And sodium too, for some people, particularly for, if you're dealing with hypertension otherwise. But really, I really want to stress today that, we're not here to espouse any specific diet. And the truth is, I don't think there is one that's one size fit all or universally best, really. The truth is, really, any diet, any eating pattern really should be based on kind of personal preferences, lifestyle, metabolic goals, and otherwise. And it needs to truly be individualized. And so really the focus should not be on a diet, really. It's actually about figuring out a sustainable healthy lifestyle moving forward, one that you can keep up for the rest of your life, right? We're not in this for the short game. We're here for the long game. And we really want to kind of promote nutrition in every way possible. So this is just a quick example of what we can see on our platform. So this is actually coming from one of our co-founders, actually, who doesn't even have diabetes or pre-diabetes. But you can take a look at these two salads, right, which we would think of as healthy, we'll say. But if you click to the next slide and so forth, you can see here the corresponding glucose data to that. So basically, just to help you orient you real fast, this is looking at two CGM curves. And what you're seeing here with the dotted lines, the upper line corresponds to 180, and the lower dotted line corresponds to 70. And each individual dot then is a glucose reading drawn from that sensor. So you can see here where the blood sugar starts and roughly where it ends up as well. So if you click next slide, on the left, you can see in terms of before the meal, the blood sugars actually start off roughly the same, 102, 87 on the right and so forth. But take a look, next slide, with what happens after, right? You can take a look at where the blood sugar peaks. And actually in the first instance, it only goes up 128 points. The other goes up to 197 actually. So a really helpful metric to look at this is actually then to compare how much did this meal raise my blood sugar, right? If you click next slide, you can see the change, right? The salad on the left actually rose your blood sugar 26 points. The one on the right rose 110 points. So a good 4 times more essentially. And this is where you can actually then tease out, these healthy salads, which is better, we'll say, from a blood sugar standpoint. And this is really a strong testament to how powerful CGM can be. In this particular case, it turned out to be the sauce, and there's a little bit of rice in there too. So those couple hidden carbs, we'll say, definitely contributed a lot to this mix, and it led our co-founder to eliminate the one on the right. Here's another example from one of our members with type 2 diabetes. This is a gentleman that tends to eat a lot in home, and this is a very common meal he used to have and so forth. So you can see here the difference with the plating, right? You can see here the portion size difference, hopefully. The chicken's about approximately the same, but with the rice proportion, you can see there's a noticeable difference. And if you look at the CGM curves then, next slide, you can kind of see how they differ actually. So if you go next slide, we can see where the blood sugar started at. Again, starting about the same, 109 on the left and 92 on the right. But take a look what happens. the peak blood sugar is very different then. You know, your peak blood sugar is 159, 180 on the right. So next slide. You can kind of see the change then. You know, 50 points for the left, but you know, a little bit more rice and so forth. You're looking now at 88 points. So this type of feedback is what helps our members then understand that, yeah, you know, actually portion size do matter. It does matter really. So this is the type of stuff that we tend to like to go over with our members to help them understand this. Okay. Last but not least, let me go through one other example. This is a gentleman who's used to have this very often, avocado toast with iced tea, coffee and so forth. And you can see as well the blood sugar curve that corresponded to that particular meal. And you know, one thing that we really like to do is use that CGM data to inform our decision of what the best treatment is for this particular case. So in this particular instance, for instance, it's very much his meals that actually tended to raise blood sugars more significantly. So we chose a medication that tended to focus on that. So next slide. You can see then having that exact same meal by adding a medication known as a GLP receptor agonist, you can see the noticeable effect. We had him specifically eat the exact same meal just for comparison purposes, and you can see the difference really. And this is then, you know, a visual testament to the effect of the medications. It helps them to understand why they're taking it and the reason why it's well suited for their needs. Okay. Last but not least, let me just briefly end on a very helpful ADA resource out there. It's at a Diabetes Food Hub, and you can find it at this address below at diabetesfoodhub.org. Next slide. And what's really nice is here, there's tons of tested recipes. There's a lot of healthy recipes to choose from. Many of them are obviously geared for diabetes, and they're designed to be easy to prepare. You know, you don't need fancy supplies and otherwise. Many of them, it offers the full spectrum, whether it's low carb, vegetarian, substitutions, otherwise. It also adapts to cultural needs and differences. So a great resource to get started with as you're looking to what you can eat and otherwise. And that's it for the presentation.